You may not know this, but China's 1.3 billion people are desperate for water, and this Chinese water crisis could have a surprising impact on the U.S., whether they try and take our water or not. See, they've got 20% of the world's population, but only 7% of the world's water. That means each Chinese citizen gets just 22 gallons a day. Here in America, the average person uses about 150 gallons per day. Now, the Chinese aren't huge fans of America anyway, but imagine what they're thinking. Here you've a country with a fraction of the people using a whole lot more water. It's not hard to see how the Chinese could get jealous, and America could be facing a pretty big threat. But let's back up for a second. By 2030, China is expected to be 190 billion cubic meters short on water. That's about as much water as is in Lake Mead, where the Hoover Hydroelectric Dam is. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know you can't pipe that much water in. But this isn't just a problem China's going to have in the future. Right now, there are 11 provinces knee-deep in what the World Bank calls water poverty. One of those provinces is Beijing. And not only that, but according to Business Insider, 190 million Chinese regularly drink polluted water. That's an obvious bad idea. It leads to, quote, far above average mortality rates. Translation, their water is killing them. But you might be wondering what this has to do with you, or the United States. Well, I'd like to call your attention to the fact that China is one of the U.S.'s largest foreign debtors, and we're having some problems paying them back. One theory is they could call our debt in their currency, yuan, or in gold. But what if they decided to call us out in water? Sounds far-fetched. But any way you slice it, the Chinese are going to need our water. Actually, that's wrong. They already desperately need water, and we've got a lot of it. Or at least we used to. The problem is, the U.S. is entering a water crisis of its own. That's why I want to share with you the #1 free water secret you need to know in the coming collapse. Just a warning, you might not survive the water crisis without this. But the good news is, if you know how to turn on your tap water, you're overqualified to use this simple secret. So let's get down to business. The world is running out of clean drinking water, and as humans, we can't survive without it. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. The Earth's surface is 71% water, but we can drink less than 0.036% of it. And most of the water we can drink is in a giant lake in Siberia. And the way the population is growing, polluting and destroying nature's water filters, we're going to be out of water soon. Some scientists say around the year 2030. The good news is we've got some time. 2030 is a pretty long way off. Don't get me wrong. I'm not thrilled about the idea of having to figure out some way to live without water, but there's not a whole lot we can do today. But here's where things get tricky. If you live in the U.S. and use well water or city water, you may not have that long. That's why I made this video, to show you the simple free water secret. It'll literally let you stockpile as much water as you want without having to buy a single bottle. And the timing for this video couldn't have been better. Here's why. Lately, the U.S. government has been trying to do what it does best: cover up what's really going on in the water crisis. It's not surprising. Just like the economy, it's too big to fix, so they just go into debt and pretend like everything is great. But the feds have slipped up on a couple of vital details. #1, we're wide open to terrorist attacks on the water supply. And #2, we're using a water system that's 80 years out of date. We're talking pipes that are 100 years old in places like Washington, D.C. No wonder we had 250,000 water line breaks in 2010 alone. But there's an even bigger problem. You might not realize it, but your tap water could be poisoning you. And that's whether you use a well or city water. But don't take my word for it. Here's a clip from an article published in August 2011. Quoting, they're talking about the U.S. here, have the safest drinking water in the world, except for the pesticides that sometimes sneak in, and the rocket fuel, and the antibiotics, end of quote. Long story short, they're saying our water isn't safe at all. Now, this might sound like some fringe conspiracy theorist, but it's not. This article was on the front page of Reader's Digest, a magazine who is about as far away from shaky theories as you can get. So if they're picking up on it, you know the situation is obvious. They go on to talk about the many scientists who found disturbing chemicals in our tap water. Stuff like bisphenol A. If you haven't heard of this puppy, you should check out Alex Jones from InfoWars. He's found some pretty disturbing stuff about how this has turned male mice and rats into females. Literally. And as a pretty strong hunch, the same thing is happening to us men in the U.S. Another chemical to learn about is fluoride. This isn't my area of expertise, but there's a lot of very